With the seismic shift in giving habits moving from in-person to online and digital recurring gifts, how well is your church maintaining the worship aspects of giving? Are you replacing inspiration with mere information? I'm Bill Hobson, and that's our focus today on the Giving series. Hi, I'm Bill Hobson, and in part one of this series on recurring digital giving, I laid out the framework for the discussion on how your church can most effectively address the huge shift in giving habits, patterns, and practices from your church family. For better or for worse, and the assessment of that is certainly open to interpretation, giving to your ministry will never look the same as it did just a year ago, and wishing it was otherwise is probably about as useful as me wondering when I should run out and buy a new comb. Those days are over. So instead, let's move forward and invest our time and energy into making sure that we are embracing the new giving era, and we're doing it with sincerity, enthusiasm, and excellence. So let's dig into the key questions that I shared at the end of part one, because each of them plays a vital role in the new era of digital giving. Up first, we have to address the matter of giving as a form of worship and whether your church has unintentionally forfeited the spiritual aspects of why we give. In my study of multiple online church service live streams, I've seen an extremely troubling trend: the trading of inspiration for information. Churches have removed any sort of giving moment from the flow of the service and replaced it with like a pregame show mindset that viewers see before the real service starts. The audience is greeted warmly by a host, and that host brings a barrage of information, much of it needed. But in that info dump, the host includes guidance on how someone watching can give. We hear the website URL and sometimes a texting to give option and the mailing address always, and there are usually some on-screen graphics to help support the information being shared. And then we move on to the start of the service. And at no point is the worship aspect of giving addressed. You're replacing inspiration with information, and it completely derails the biblical perspective on giving. It also short-circuits any chance that someone watching would be touched, moved, or inspired to the point that they wanted to make a gift. There are a bunch of Netflix series where after the opening few moments, you're given the option to hit a button and skip the intro to get right to the meat of the show. And those consuming your church service online, they might as well have that same option to skip the intro because it's become a generic montage of announcements and information without inspiration. If your church fails to address the worship aspect of giving, isn't it logical to assume your congregants might do the same? Here's a test. Take a look at the online giving history of those who have set up recurring digital gifts. How often does the amount change? Here's a helpful hint. It doesn't, unless they stop giving. And really, why would it? Week after week, they've been hearing the information, but week after week, they haven't been hearing inspiration. When we were in the habit of giving in person with physical currency and processes, a truly touched heart might be more likely to give a larger amount. So can that still happen in a touchless digital offering world? Yes. Yes, it can. But not unless you inspire. And inspiration happens through the sharing of stories of changed lives, ministry impact, and powerful testimony. Let's crank up the Wayback Machine for a minute and flash back to a bygone era, like way back to 2019. Churches were meeting in person then, and for the vast majority of churches in America, the offering was part of the service plan. Countless hours of discussion and controversy focused on where to put the announcements in the church news, and many decided to open the service with information to get it out of the way and not interrupt worship. Never mind the fact that by the end of the service, maybe 2 out of 100 people could pass a multiple choice test about those announcements, but we had a solution. Move them to the pregame show, right? That's where the news is going to go. Then along came a pandemic, and ripples of reevaluation about having the giving moment inside the service made everybody fearful that it was interrupting worship. It wasn't interrupting worship. It is worship. Now, you don't really need me to elaborate on the amount of time Jesus spent talking about money. You've heard it, studied it, and probably preached on it. Giving is an act of worship. And yet somehow churches have demoted it to a piece of information instead of inspiration. Here's what I'd like to suggest, and be happy to jump on a call with your leadership team to discuss in depth. Whether your church meets online, in person, or both, the offering needs to be part of the flow of service, not the pregame show. Now, why? Well, number one, if you ask people to give before you inspire them, you remove the worshipful aspect of giving. Number two, you do know there's a reason you hear about the Super Bowl halftime show, but you have no idea who's performing pregame, right? Or why your favorite musical acts or comedians have somebody come out to warm up the crowd before the main attraction. You know why you get so irritated when the barrage of coming attractions takes up 20 minutes before the main feature you actually paid to see. There's a huge difference in audience participation and attentiveness once the service starts. Reason number three, you have powerful God stories to share. He deserves to be praised and given glory for the great things he hath done. There used to be a hymn along those lines. Please hear me carefully. You certainly need to share how to give, but don't leave out the why to give. And number four, find a time within the flow of your service for the giving moment. Prepare for it. You know, we spend hours getting the musicians ready and rehearsed. The pastor certainly prepares his message, often weeks in advance, and those are both vital aspects of worship. But so is giving. Prepare accordingly. In the next video, we'll explore strategies for encouraging recurring digital givers to increase the amount of their recurring gifts, keyed by the inspiration you begin including each week. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments and questions about what we've discussed here today, so please reach out via email at thegivingseries@gmail.com. Thank you for being willing to think through this vital ministry, worship, and giving connection. And if your church or ministry could benefit from further insight and guidance, I hope you'll reach out and say hello. We'll see you next time as we continue on the Giving Series.